Okay, it has been a long time in the making here. I have some dried, pre-ran. I already ran this. This was crimson oxide and aluminum oxide. Poured it out, let it dry, and this is what you get. So what I do is I'll obviously reuse it. Put it in a Tupperware like this. And these are all silicate carbide, crimson oxide, and aluminum oxide all mixed together. So there's some silicon 500 grit, really fine stuff. Then I just put it into the Tupperware, dry, and reuse it. So I don't know how many times I can reuse it. I think it's like an unlimited amount of time because it just becomes finer and finer and finer. And the more of a wash that you do with your soap, so like this is my rinse soap. Anyhow, you can just reuse it. So what I've done is I poured that out because I already dried that. And I'm going to go over a unique situation. These are the Tumbler barrels. The big barrels, the big boy right here. You can barely lift. I mean, this is pretty stout, pretty heavy. And these are dry. This one's dry. You can hear it. This one's dry. And this one's dry. And I had to run it for a month and 2 weeks because what had happened was initially I set up to run for a month and I ended up having problems with keeping it going and changing the belt out over and over. So I just decided to extend it 2 weeks to make up for lost time. So lost time incident took a month, ran to 2 months, but it's still the whole thing, the entire thing ran off of solar. So we'll get to the point and start to open these dry tumbler runs and see how they've worked. I'm just going to take my time here. Remember the idea, if I can keep my Kermit the Frog voice down. Oh, scored a little bit there. Is to make it so that the dry tumble run is more efficient. So I'm reducing weight because if this was full of water, it would weigh a lot more. And I'm reducing the drag coefficient so it's lighter and fluffier and rubs a lot more. The only problem is you don't want to have it to where there's very little dry that's rubbing because then you'll damage your stones, and you won't want too much because they won't rub against each other. So I had to keep refilling it and watching how much has rubbed against each other. So you can see that the dry has actually went into the stones. You know what? That's not too bad. I was contemplating doing see, all the high spots are really shiny. A dry run and then finishing it off with a wet run. But that's pretty interesting. Wow, I can feel the difference. It's like a piece of glass. It's really smooth. Some of them I can't even tell. Boy, that is really strange. It's like rough in some spots and then polished in others. Wow, that's really weird. But again, it was an experiment to try to reduce the drag. Certain materials are actually etched away, and other sides, other pieces are smoother. It's really odd. But I'm going to mix them up and run them all again, because this was just a test to see if my hypothesis, my experiment, my scientific method was a correct idea. So far, it doesn't look like it's done much. So maybe I have to have liquid, but I put a lot of pumice in here, and it's like gone. It must have coated everything and just Wow, look at that. Let's see what it looks like when I wet some of this stuff. It doesn't even come off. Wow, I'll have to do a rinse. I'll have to run it with soap. Some of this, it's not even... Interesting. And I'm not too worried about it. I've been tumbling these same batch of stones for quite a while, trying to improve the look and... Boy, that's really interesting. It's almost like it went into... See, look at that. That's really strange. It's super rough right here, but it's super polished right there. It looks cool, though. I kind of like how it's doing that. And this stuff just comes off. It just scrapes off. That's really weird. It's interesting. Let me see what happens if I keep... And I apologize for having the phone on a ladder, but it's the last thing I could come up with since I don't have anybody helping me out. Look at that. Maybe it's done a really good job. It's not a rough spot. This is glass smooth. The whole thing. It's like a buildup. Like it's rubbed off and it's created these buildups. Look at how smooth that is. Man. Very interesting. First I thought it was roughing the stone up, but now it looks like it did what I wanted it to do, which is to have less resistance and more, more polishing going on. That's impressive. That's interesting. I'll still burnish them though. I'm going to use ivory soap and burnish them. Let me see something here. Let's get a couple that are still rough looking and see. Yeah, it'll have to be burnished to get this off. Almost like a rinse burnish. I'll put a lot of ivory and then a lot of water. But look at the detail. It's really pushed the... It's interesting. Yeah, I can kind of use this to get that off. Wow. It's like there is not a single microstructure that's left alone. This stuff has really gotten in deep with the fine polish. And the detail is insane. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. Could have a true 50,000 grit, the namesake of the channel. Yeah, this buildup has to be scratched off, but underneath is just astounding. But I'm going to burnish it. I'm going to rerun it. I might end up just putting it in the way that it is, and it'll do its thing. Let me put those back. Put all this back. Yeah, I'll have to run it with a lot of water, a very little amount of soap. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. I can kind of show you what I do. But it's all the same steps being done to the same stones, because I keep trying to figure out a way to improve what's going on with the surfaces. Um, it didn't really break it up too much either, which is impressive. Because there's no, it's all, I was thinking I'd open this and it'd be a lot of powder, but it's all stuck and globulated to everything. Every surface is coated. And it's like a buildup, like a rock almost, like a sandblasting that's coated itself on the inside. So that's interesting. Let's go to barrel number 2. I gotta check and see if this is recording because I don't want to waste my time. Okay. So I do barrel number 2, and I wrap them with the bandage, which works great. You can see some of it had leaked out the side, but the bandage held most of it in. It makes the tumbler have a better grip. So again, it's all about changing the drag coefficient, as well as yeah, this is like the same thing, which is fine. Yeah, I'll have to rerun it. It's the same thing. Rerun it wet with yeah, it's not even worth looking at. It's the same thing as that one. Let's see what this one's done. So yeah, this is 1 month and 2 weeks. The thing I really want to try is getting a hold of some is kind of difficult, but wet 60 grit aluminum oxide. So yeah, look at that. I put this extra plate on it. Look how polished that is. To act as a protection and keep the whole thing together. Because we did have a few instances where it fell apart and I was having to redo it. Let me see here. Pop this open. Okay, what the hell? Oh, that's the regular rock. I want to see what that... I put a normal rock in there just to see what it would do to it. Just right off the ground. That's interesting. It's so coated in the low spots, but it's like completely... It was able to build an impressive buildup on it. Let me see if I can... Get it with the other one. Yeah, I'll just run all this stuff wet. But it was a neat test. But anyhow, I was saying there's a 60 grit aluminum oxide that I've always wanted to try. It's like a really large grit, obviously. But the longer you run it, the more it breaks down. Another Tumbler video, the guy ran it for a year. And what you ended up with was these rough spots in the stone. But all the high spots, which was a lot of high spots, were rubbed down and then polished like a mirror. And that's interesting. I'll put that back in. So yeah, it's more the same. This one looks like it's really... I think I put more silicone in here. That's why it's coated differently. But also, we don't really have a way of gauging or judging Missouri, right? Like, or if you live in an area that has a high that's pretty cool. Where there's a lot of moisture in the air, high humidity, and that may have been kind of a problem here. Wow, that's crazy smooth. So yeah, I'll have to run a rinse cycle and then go over them, because this is pretty impressive. There's probably a few. Let me see what I got, and I'll get back with a rinse cycle.